Okay, welcome everybody to the final presentation of the day. I'm going to be presenting on rules changes that have happened since the pandemic. There was a lot of them to go through, so I didn't actually include everything. I just included the ones that I thought would be the most important, slash the ones that would be the most confusing. So like, I'm not going to explain to you that no is keyworded now or something, because like, that's pretty intuitive. And if I were to include all of those things, it would it would go on for way too long, and it's already kind of over time. So yeah, just keep that in mind. I'm going to go through things that are confusing. First, a little bit about me. I'm originally from St. Louis in the United States, currently living in Canada. I've been playing Magic since Gatecrash, so like about early 2013. Got my L1 after about a year and a half. Got my L2 pretty recently in 2018. I was on the GP circuit for about a year and a half, so I probably saw many of you, even though I'm terrible with names, and I apologize. I wrote Rules Lawyer, which is a Discord bot that like you can use as a search engine for rules questions. You may have seen people using it throughout this conference. And by people, I mean mostly me, because I'm still trying to get more people to use it, but whatever. I mostly play blue decks, as I mentioned in the pre-roll, and I play mostly Legacy and Vintage, and I play Vintage Rotisserie Draft. So some of you may know me from that context if you've watched Eric Levine stream St. Louis Vintage Rotisserie Draft in the past. Today, we're going to be using a kind of experimental bot that I wrote in order to do quiz questions. I wanted to intersperse them through my presentation, and I wanted them to like show up in Discord, so you didn't have to use a third-party service. So the bot will just ask the questions in Discord. It'll place reactions. You can react on top of those. The questions are like of varying difficulties, so I wouldn't expect anybody to get all of them unless your name is Isaac, because Isaac will get all of the questions, I'm sure. They all have just one answer. Discord will allow you to react to multiple things, but only your last one is recorded. So keep that in mind. And you are incentivized to answer correctly, obviously. You're incentivized to answer quickly because you get more points, and you're incentivized to not change your answer, because if you change your answer, it overwrites your timestamp and you will get less points. So, surprise quiz question. In which one of these hipster formats do I consider myself to be an expert? Just to make sure that everyone knows how this bot works. And that people were paying attention on the About Me slide. It looks like people were. Cool. Yeah, I am. That is bad. Huh, why is it? Oh yeah, it's weird, that's fine. Yeah. So it just does the top couple. Yeah, so I play a lot of Vintage Rotisserie Draft. I'm now worried that this doesn't sort in the correct order, which would upset me. But fuck, we're just gonna go through it. Anyway, let's keep going. So the first thing that I found when scrolling through the rules changes is mutate, right? Because that came out in Korea. That was the first set after the pandemic started, and mutate is confusing as hell, right? Like we all, I think, know how it like generally works. Like it works kind of like bestow, like you play the creature on top of another creature or below the other creature, and basically it has the characteristics of the card on top, but the piles have all abilities. So like if there's cards on the bottom that have other like abilities like flying or vigilance, then that entire pile will still have it. And a lot of these mutate cards also have like when this creature mutates triggers that triggers both when you mutate with that card and when you mutate cards on top of it. So for example, if you have a mysterious egg that is a 0/2 that says when this creature mutates, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, and you mutate it with a Gen Razor. then you can choose to either put the gem razor on the top or the bottom. And if you put the gem razor on top, then you get a gem razor that has reach and trample, because gem razor has reach and trample. It has the like mutate ability that doesn't do anything. And it has, when this creature mutates, plus one counter on it, and you will get that trigger. And then it also has the when it mutates, you kill an artifact or enchantment. Or if you put the mysterious egg on top, you get a 0/2 that has all of that text. I would recommend getting a gem razor and not a mysterious egg. In most cases, though sometimes I guess you're playing around Aether Gust, so you want the mysterious egg. But you probably want the gem razor. Details, yay! This is what makes this so complicated, right? I took a couple quotes out of the CR, but this is obviously not all of the rules because it's like 7 pages. So mutate is an alternative cost because it says you may pay that cost rather than pay the disposed mana cost. It can only target non-human creatures, which is kind of weird, but is just one of the restrictions that they have. I guess it was for flavor or like gameplay reasons. I didn't really draft a courier, so I don't really know. But it only targets non-humans, and it only targets creatures that have the same owner. So you can only mutate onto your own things. You cannot mutate onto things that you have stolen from your opponent. If the creatures, if you kill the creature in response because or something, or like has protection from that color, or like whatever, it stops becoming a mutating creature spell and it resolves as a creature spell. So if I were to like mutate that heron onto something and they kill the thing in response, I resolve and I get a Dream Tarot heron that's a 3/4 flyer. Mutate is a copyable effect, and the timestamp of that effect is the time that the objects are merged. I'm not going to go into too much detail on what all of these things mean because you're all judges and you have a general idea of what a copyable effect and what an alternative cost and stuff like that is. And obviously, I just want to get through all of this. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, a mutated permanent has all abilities of each card and token that represents it. It's not a text changing effect. I think that I might have said it was a text changing effect. It's not. It has the text of the top card, but it has the abilities of the entire card. Sorry, the entire pile. Another thing that's complicated, what happens if a mutate pile leaves the battlefield, right? Basically, what happens is the owner can pick the order. So like if you kill a like mutate pile, multiple cards go to the graveyard and you can choose what order the cards go into. And if they're going into the library, say because of Terminus, you don't have to choose which, sorry, you don't have to show your opponent what order they go in. If an effect needs to like find the object, it can find each of the cards and perform actions on each. So for example, if it was like destroy the creature and then like they take damage and equal to like CMC or something, it can like find each of the cards and it does damage for each of the CMCs. I don't know if that's an actual card, but that's just what came out of my head. So, quiz. I am worried that this is actually sorting by least scores instead of highest scores, but that's what happens when I don't test things properly. I apologize, but you will, you know if you got questions right? So I try to mutate Cavern Whisper onto Grizzly Bears, but you kill Grizzly Bears. So what happens? The Cavern Whisper fizzles and it just doesn't happen. So it goes to the graveyard. It resolves as a creature, or it resolves as a creature and you also get the mutate trigger. And looks like answers have settled down. And yeah, the answer is yeah, I did this backwards. I'm kind of embarrassed, but now I know for next time. Okay. Yeah. I try to mutate Dirtbat onto a Thalia Guardian of Thraben. How much do I pay for it? So Dirtbat has mutate cost of 4 black. Do I pay 4 black? Do I have to pay 1 more? Do I pay 3 black? Or can I not do this? I Yeah, I can't fix this. um, I, I'm sorry, I cannot fix this live. Yeah. So like, so yeah, Thalia is a human. So you cannot mutate dirge fat onto a human. I tried to trick people with this, and I think, and it looks like I got a couple people with it, but um, yeah, I knew something was going to go wrong with this thing. All right. Uh, one more for this. You cast Aether Gust on a migratory great form that's mutated onto a Stormcrow. So it looks like this. Which of these statements is true? So the Aether Gust says the spell, or permanent, in this case a permanent, put, uh, it goes on top of its owner's top. Sorry, it goes onto the bottom of the owner's library or the top. So can I choose to put one card on top and one on bottom because there's 2 cards? Do I have to put them all on the top or all on the bottom, but you don't get to know? Do I get to do I not get to choose which order? And is it A and B or A and C? I'm gonna let people stare at this for a little while because it um, looks like people are deciding. I see a lot of peer pressure going on, which, because I saw, a fair split, but now everyone is fairly confident that it's D. Okay, so the answer actually is B, that because I don't actually get to pick which to put one card on top and one on bottom. It's basically that the migratory great horn functions as a set. So like that creature goes on top or on bottom, and then once you've decided if it's on top or bottom, you then get to choose what order you put the cards in. So I saw a couple people picking B, and then they decided not to pick B. So yeah, this one is hard. I will also note that this is a little bit different from how it functions on Magic Arena. I think Magic Arena actually puts the cards on top or bottom randomly, but that's not correct. So just, I want to call that out, that like that is different from how like many of you may have played with this card. Okay, so that was the last one for Mutate. Companions. A lot of you have probably played a lot of Arena with companions, or a lot of Legacy and Vintage with companions, where Loris and Lutri and were kind of miserable. So Loris is back. Oh no, I don't want to do this. So the way that companion works is that the companions have a restriction. So with Karuga Tobacco Sage, it says your starting deck contains only cards with CMC 3 or greater and like land cards. So your starting deck has to meet that condition. So it's the deck that you present. And then it has, so like basically, if at any point during the game, you can choose to pay 3 mana to put the companion from outside the game into your hand. Obviously, this is a change from what it says on the card in the reminder text, because they changed what companion means for balance reasons. Turn 1 Black Lotus into Loris into replay my Black Lotus was the most miserable play experience that I have ever seen, and I'm glad that that is gone. So, details of companion. You reveal your companion before the game begins, and you can pay 3 mana at sorcery speed. to put that card into your hand. I kind of mentioned this, but I do want to mention once again that you do have to reveal the companion before the game begins, and that you can only put it into your hand at sorcery speed. This is a special action, so this applies to all of the rules that apply to special actions also apply to this. So it doesn't use the stack. You can't respond to it. It just happens, right? One thing I do want to note here is that commanders must fulfill companion requirements because it's not clear how exactly that works. So you put your commander from your deck into the command zone after you reveal your companion. So at the time that you reveal your companion, the commander is technically still in your deck. So your companion does have to meet that restriction. I know this is a conference based mostly around the comprehensive rules, but I did want to bring out the IPG stuff around companions because I think that's what's the most confusing about this, and the most people don't know how this works because you haven't played these in paper, probably, right? So what happens if you, say, have Loris of the Dream Den, but you have another Loris of the Dream Den in your library? So you draw the Loris, and you're like, wait a second, I'm only supposed to have the one that's my companion. I can't have this, judge. What do you do? Well, it's a deck problem, and basically this solution follows approximately the same pattern as if you were to have like forgotten to sideboard before your game one, right? Where it's like the judge looks through the decks, determines which cards violate the restriction. In practice, I think the player can probably do this as long as you trust the player to do that properly. And then randomly you pick sideboard cards to replace them with. So like the judge randomly picks sideboard cards, and then the opponent's like, okay, these are the cards, and then you pick, and then the opponent basically picks which cards go where. So if you've drawn one of the legal cards, but the rest are in your deck, the opponent gets to pick which one is the one that you've drawn and which ones are the ones that are still in your deck. If you can't do this because there aren't enough cards in the sideboard to swap in, then it's a game loss. I will note that this fix does not allow the player to then play the companion in future games. If they want to do that, then they need to fix the deck list. And because they're fixing the deck list, it's a deck list problem, and that is a game loss. So I think in practice what will happen is that it will just be a game loss and the player will want to fix the deck. So, companion quiz. What a player is playing commander with Narset Enlightened Master, which I have just found out today does not have the correct printed Oracle text, but it is hidden, so whatever. And you want to include Obash the Prey Piercer as your companion. Which one of these is true? Does this work? Does it not work because of color restrictions? Does it not work because Narset is odd? Or is it both of those? I will give people a couple minutes to, not a couple minutes, a couple seconds to click whatever they feel. I'm glad that there are some people who are sticking to their guns, as they say, and are not going with what everyone else is saying. See a couple answers being changed. All right, I'm going to close this. So the correct answer here is D, that it is both B and C. So once again, it doesn't work because Narset has CMC6, so it doesn't fit Obash's restriction, and Obash is a black card, so it doesn't fit Narset's restriction. So they are not friends. Cool. Does that make sense to everybody? I feel like I've been talking a lot and there hasn't been a whole lot of discussion, so I'm a little worried, but okay, moving on. Keyword counters. So There are some cards that have been printed since Korea that put counters that grant keywords onto creatures of the permanents. Technically, because of Skullbriar, these counters can be not on the battlefield, but for the most case, they will be creatures on the battlefield. So looking at the rules, a keyword counter on a permanent or a card in the zone other than the battlefield causes that object to gain that keyword. So once again, so basically, yeah, if you have a Skullbriar and it is in your graveyard with a Death Touch counter, it has Death Touch in your graveyard. And I'm not sure how that's relevant, but I'm sure there is an interaction that makes that relevant. There's probably something where it's like reanimate target creature with flying or something. I don't know. So that does still work, and keyword counters apply in layer 6 with the rest of the ability adding and ability removing effects. For some reason, I thought they applied in the same layer as like +1/+1 and -1/-1 counters, but that is not the case. They apply with the rest of the ability adding and removing effects, so it basically works the way that you would expect to. It's pretty simple because keywords are abilities, yes. But like I thought, like all the counters apply in the same layer, but that's not actually how it works. So spontaneous flight, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn, and then you put a flying counter on it, and the flying counter lasts indefinitely. But the +2/+2 obviously lasts until end of turn. Excess damage. Spells can have trample, basically, right? Some of you may remember Super Duper Death Ray from one of the unsets. I don't know what this is. I don't know, the third unset, which is, it does 4 to a creature and it has trample. And now we have that in Black Border. So Flame Spell deals 4 damage to target creature, and X damage is dealt to that creature's controller instead. So it's basically the same card, right? So excess damage, similar to trample, is damage greater than lethal damage that would be dealt to a creature. And lethal damage is defined as the creature's toughness minus damage marked on that creature and other damage being dealt to it at the same time. So, and it also works with Death Touch. So if you give your spell Death Touch, it will deal 1 to the creature and then the rest to the opponent. I believe there's a giant in Kaldheim that gives all of your spells this effect. Not sure what it's called, but I think you can use that to interact with some stuff to give a spell Death Touch or something. So quiz. I cast Flame Spell targeting your Runeclaw Bear that has not been dealt damage. Runeclaw Bear, of course, is at 2/2. In response, you cast Bandage targeting the Runeclaw Bear. As Flame Spell resolves, how much excess damage is dealt to the opponent's face? So Flame Spell must deal 1 damage in order to deal 3 to the bear and kill it. Flame Spell must deal 2 damage, or I can choose to deal like 1 or 2, meaning I can choose to assign 2 or 3 damage to it. Oh, there's no answer slide to this. I forgot. So yeah, this one is honestly what I could just do is this. No? Does that not work? Cool. Yeah, I could just delete those so that you aren't like looking at them. Cool. So yeah, you can choose to deal either. So you can't choose to deal either 1 or 2 because it is basically you have to deal damage equal to the remaining toughness, basically. So you have to deal 2. So you deal 2 to the bear and deal 2 to the face, and it does not kill the bear. That bear lives. Commander draft. This is a fun format. And probably something that a lot of people may not be aware of because it's not on Magic Arena, right? It looks like it's on Magic Online and people have played it a lot of Magic Online. But if you don't play Magic Online, you don't know about this, right? So Commander Draft is drafted with Commander Legends packs, which are packs of 20 cards, which are a bit more. One thing I do want to keep in mind here is that you pick 2 cards from each pack before you pass them. So you open your pack, it has 20 cards in it, you pick 2 cards, and then you pass a pack of 18, which is a little bit weird. I think it makes sense because otherwise you're passing like this 20 card pack, it takes forever. But like in this at least like makes a little bit more sense. And then you have to build a commander deck with a 60 card minimum, including a legendary commander. And the restrictions on that are on the next slide. Yes. So, like I mentioned before, you open a pack, you draft 2 cards from it, and then you pass the rest. Other than that, it's basically the same as normal drafting. After the draft is complete, you have a card pool, and then you pick basically one of the legendary cards in your pool to become your commander. Actually, a lot of the cards in the format have partner, so you can usually have 2 commanders if you want. But what if you don't have a legendary? Like what if the draft just got completely trade backed? Then you can choose to add up to 2 cards named the Prismatic Piper to your card pool, which is basically a 5-mana 3/3. It's right here. And basically you pick which color they are. So if you have mostly a pile of blue and green cards, but you don't have a commander for it, you can have 2 Prismatic Pipers that partner with each other, and they are blue and green, or you assign them as blue and green. And then it is a legal deck. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend doing that if you're able to have actual legendaries, but that is an option. So to clarify the deck construction rules, the deck must contain at least 60 cards. There's no maximum deck size because it's draft and you can have as many as you want. I would recommend to have 60 because that is generally correct. And of course, your deck may include any number of cards from that card pool. Obviously, usually DH is a like singleton format, but in this case, even though you're building an EDH deck, you can have any number of cards with the same name as long as you drafted those. Encore. So once again, this may be a mechanic that you have not seen before because it appears mostly on cards from Commander Legends. If you are mostly on Arena, you haven't seen cards with this mechanic, right? So Unearth says that you exile the card from your graveyard and pay the cost, and then you get a token of that's copy of the card for each opponent that you have, and then those tokens basically have to attack those opponents, and then at the end step you sacrifice them. So it's basically Unearth, right? Obviously, it's functionally a little bit different, but that's the idea. So, what's the difference between Encore and Unearth? Given what I just said. Since the question is in the chat, I'm actually just going to go back so that you can read the CR. I'm going to make this a little bit easier for you. All right, looks like people have basically stopped. I'll close this now. Um, so the correct answer is E, that it does all of these things. Uh, uh, Unearth actually takes the card out of the graveyard and puts it onto the battlefield, so it doesn't make a token copy. And also, Unearth does not force you to attack, though I would normally recommend that you attack with a creature that's going to die at the end of the turn. So, but it doesn't make you do that, and Encore does make you attack. So for each opponent, you make a token that's a copy of the creature, and then those tokens have to attack each of the opponents. Not explore the wild possibilities of Encore since I have a high ceiling. Yeah, there was a 9-mana Encore creature that says when it dies, you make 3/3/3s, and it has Encore for 12. So I guess if you pay 12, thank you. If you pay 12, you get many 3/3s depending on how many opponents you have. That's cool. It does say Encore 12 though, and I feel like if you have 12 mana, you should be able to just kill your opponent pretty easily. I don't play Commander though, so I don't really know. This is something that has been brought up in the replacement effects presentations, but there have been changes to how commanders work. So it used to be that if you had Child of Alara and you sacrificed it, you could put it into the command zone, but then it wouldn't trigger its effect of destroy on land permanents. And that was kind of unfortunate because it kind of makes sense that, like, hey, when it dies, it gets its dice trigger, right? And it doesn't actually die. But they changed it so that if your commander dies or gets exiled, it first goes to that zone, and then a state-based action happens where you may put it into the command zone afterwards. So now, if you have Chart of Alara or you have Lenda the Dusk Rose, you can get those triggers and then also have them in the command zone and not have to worry about nonsense about reanimating your commander. How do I use 12 mana's Finale of Devastation into my brain? Oh my god. I have cast Finale of Devastation for 12 in like the in standard. That happened. So just taking a look at this, if a commander was put into a graveyard or exile, and the card was put into that zone since the last turn state-based actions were checked. So basically, the state-based action only happens once for each action. Its owner may put it into the command zone, so you don't have to, and it is a state-based action once again. So things that affect state-based actions, and it happens at the same time that other state-based actions happen. I would encourage people to bring in this discussion. And, but of course, if the commander is put into its owner's hand or library, that is still a replacement effect. That has not changed. Only if it is put into a graveyard or in exile. So you are playing God Eternal Oketra as your commander, and it's destroyed by Doomblade. So the next time a player gets priority, what are the possible locations of God Eternal Oketra? Can it be in your graveyard? Can it be in your library? Can it be in your command zone, or is it all three of those? Yeah, this one's pretty easy. So yeah, the answer is all of the above, right? That you may keep it in your graveyard if you want. For some reason, you may put it third from the top of your library because you may use its when it dies, always put into exile trigger, and not put it in your command zone, or you may put it in your command zone. So none of this should be too surprising. Modal DFCs. These are fun. So Isaac has a question, and because it, oh, Isaac, you checked this. You checked the slides. I blame you. Yeah, you're right. I should have said the next time the stack is empty and a player has priority. I knew there was going to be a mistake. There already was a mistake, but I knew there was going to be another mistake. Oops. I think I put like, I think originally the text was like afterwards, what are the possible locations? But then someone said something about but then I think Isaac said something about like, oh well, sleep-based actions happen afterwards, so you can't, so it has to be in your graveyard. But yeah, okay, cool. Yes. To clarify, it can only be in your library after that trigger resolves, and you do get priority with that trigger. Okay. Okay, so mono double face cards. So these are cards that can be played as either the front or the back half. So instead of having a magic card face on the back, you have a magic card on the front and you have another magic card on the back. And they both have their own types, their own names, their own like mana costs. When they're not on the stack or on the battlefield, they function only as the front half. So you may have seen the new Oops All Spells deck that plays a bunch of variations of this. So basically, you can just play a bunch of these as lands, but they're not lands. So if you play a Balustrade Supply people or an Undercity Informer, so you play this, you mill your deck because you don't hit any lands, even though there are actually lands in your deck. They're just these. That works, right? Because this is in your library, it's just an instant. It's just a force spike, right? There are three types of modal DFCs so far, but obviously this isn't something that's in the rules. It's just that's what has been printed so far. There are spells with lands on the back, so this Fury Disruption is an instant on the front. It's a force spike, and then if you get to the point in the game where a force spike isn't good anymore, you can play it as a tap land. So both halves of these are playable, right? There are legendary spells on like both sides. So you have a legendary on the front, and if you draw a second copy, you don't want to play the same legendary because then it will die. That would be bad. So you play the third half, which has a different name and is still legendary, but you can have both of those on the battlefield at the same time. Then there are also non-basic lands on both sides. So the pathways, basically, they enter untapped and they tap for a color on one side, and then on the other side, they tap for a different color. And I believe they exist in all 10 combinations, but I don't know what the cards are called because I haven't been playing a lot of Standard. So, which one of these cards allows a player to put Bala Ged's Sanctuary, which is the back face of a like Moto DFC, onto the battlefield as a land? Can you put it onto the battlefield with Growth Spiral? Can you put it onto the battlefield with a Primarch Excavator? Can you put it onto the battlefield with a Splendid Reclamation? Or some combination of those? looks like people have approximately the right idea. Yeah, people seem to be pretty unanimous on this one. So yeah, the answer is that you can only put them onto the battlefield with a Gremlin excavator because they are not land cards, right? Like Growth Spiral says you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield, and I believe this on the other side is a sorcery. It's not a land, right? As the point. Same thing with the Splendid Reclamation. It puts land cards from your graveyard onto the battlefield top, but the Excavator just says you may play lands from your graveyard, so that works. It's actually pretty interesting because, as a side note, this I believe is a functional change that they made to these cards once they printed Moto DFCs. If you look at, for example, the last printing of Crucible of Worlds, it says you may play land cards from your graveyard, but if you look at the Oracle text, it says you may play lands. So that was something that they did consciously for this interaction. Yeah, so like basically the way that like Moto DFCs work is that you can play both, is that you can play either half of it, right? So like you can choose to, so like things that let you play lands will let you play that card as a land. But you can't put it onto the battlefield as, yeah, the word play lets you choose sides. But of course, you can't play the front half of it using an excavator or a crucible. Cool. Party. This is a mechanic from the news and the car set. That basically it counts the number of creature types you have out of a list. That list being cleric, rogue, warrior, and wizard. So you basically uncard. Okay. So you basically count how many cards are in your party, and then you get an effect based on that. So this card says target opponent reveals the number of cards from your hand equal to the number of creatures in your party, and then you choose one of these cards, and that player discards that card. So it's basically like a blackmail effect, right? That works with the this mechanic, and because it is a rogue, they will always reveal at least one unless they kill this creature in response or some other weird reason. But yeah, so it's like they basically they discard out of either one card up to 4 cards. The calculations of a player's party is performed automatically by the game. When your party count becomes relevant, you don't have to specify which creatures are in your party to find where. You just get a number, and if there are multiple ways to count, then it is counted such that you get the highest results. And then a player has a full party if there are 4 creatures in that player's party. So if you meet each of these, if you have each of these, right? Which all of that should make sense, but I feel the need to say that just in case you didn't know that. So I control a Chameleon Colossus, which has every creature type. What is the size of my party? I saw a couple people picking other answers, but it looks like people have settled on B, which is correct. God, this is embarrassing. Okay. So yeah, as I mentioned before, it is up to 1 creature for each of the following. You do not get to get. You could be mad at me if I tell you that I don't have that. I will try to figure out a way to Get it? So it is one creature can only fulfill one of these things. So if you have a communal colossus, that can be either your cleric or your rogue or your warrior or your wizard, but it cannot be all four, right? Like I'm sure there's some D&D joke to make here, but I am I am not good at D&D. So yes, you can have warrior wizards, but it only counts as one of them, right? A player attacks with Archpriest of Iona while also controlling Snapcaster Mage. She marks 1 damage. One infraction has been committed. So the player has a cleric and a wizard, which are 2. So the party size is 2, but she said that it is 1 damage. What is the infraction here? Isaac pointed out to me that this question has a component that will make people argue about it ad infinitum, but I did not. I purposely redid the question. Sorry, I purposely redid the answers to avoid that argument. So I tried to word it to avoid that, but maybe it's still there. Hopefully not. Cool. So the answer here is that it is a warning because basically they have not maintained the games. They that like they should be taking 2, and instead their card had they said take 1. The other thing here was people say, well, why isn't this? Sorry, it is a GRB, and it is a failure to maintain for the opponent if they do not catch it. One thing, so basically, the argument was, why isn't this a CPV? But I don't want to get into that. People who are smarter than me can argue about that ad infinitum. Foretell, so another mechanic in Kaldheim. Actually, I think that last one wasn't in Kaldheim, so this one is in Kaldheim. This has been brought up by a couple people already, but you can pay 2 to exile a card with Foretell face down during your turn, and then on a later turn you can cast it for cheaper. So Doomscar is a 5-mana Wrath of God. It's a 5-mana Day of Judgment, I guess. Sorry, and it has Foretell 1 white white. So on turn 2 you can Foretell it for 2, and then on turn 3 you can cast it from exile for its Foretell cost of 1 white white, or you can wait any number of turns afterwards, right? So Foretell can be done anytime a player has priority during their turn. Note this doesn't say at sorcery speed or any variation of that, so you can Foretell like in combat if you want to. There is a card that like gets bigger when you Foretell things, so like you can use Foretell as a combat trick. But it is just anytime on your turn. You may cast that card after the current turn has ended. So you can't Foretell a Doomscar and then immediately play the Doomscar. You have to wait. And exiling a card is a special action, so it follows all the other rules of special actions. Foretell is, I believe this is something that Magic Arena does not do correctly. So I do want to point this out, that if you have multiple Foretell cards in exile, much like with Morph cards, you have to ensure that the cards can be differentiated from each other. So like, this is the first Foretell, this is the second Foretell, etc., etc. It's not necessarily that it's buggy. I think it's just that like they don't consider that like people actually care about this information, so they don't display it. Also, yeah, you can't cheat in Arena, but this is how it's supposed to work, right? What's that? The cards must be easily differentiated, and obviously you can't mix it with the other face down foot exiled cards. And then also, if a player leaves the game, you have to reveal all of your foretold cards just to ensure that you could have legally foretold those cards. I thought there was a question for this one. Guess not. Okay. Boast, also a mechanic from Kaldheim. This is an ability on creatures that you can activate if you have it attacked with that creature. So a boast ability, basically it says what it does, right? Like you pay this and then you get this effect, right? And you can only do that if the creature is attacked. You don't have to have dealt damage with the creature. It doesn't have to be on your second main phase. You can activate it in combat, but you can only activate it once per turn, which I believe the reminder text on Magic Arena for at least during release didn't say once per turn. So like my Kaldheim pre-release sealed pool on Magic Arena, I tried to activate Boast twice and it didn't work because I didn't know it didn't do that. But it does not do that. You can only activate it once per turn. There is a card, I believe, that lets you activate Boast abilities twice, or any number of times, or something like that. But this is, I'm sorry, but in most cases, you can only activate them once. Cool. Last one, cascade changes, as many of you may have noticed. So the interaction between cascade cards like Ardent Plea and Violent Outburst and then cascading into Valky and casting a Tybalt was really messing with Eternal formats. Legacy, I believe, for 2-ish weeks, like the top 8 of like all of the Legacy challenges, I think was like minimum 6 Turbo Valky Cascade decks. So it was pretty miserable. And it was just wasn't intended that you could cascade into a super expensive spell because like the front face of like Valky is cost 2 and the back face cost 7, and then you just cast the back face. So they added this line into Cascade, which is that you may cast the spell without paying its mana cost only if it's converted. That spell's converted mana cost is less than the spell that you're cascading with converted mana cost. So if you cast a Bloodblade Elf, you can only you cascade it into a spell, you can only cast that spell if its CMC is less than the CMC of Bloodblade Elf, which is 4. So, once again, if I cast Bloodblade Elf, which one of these spells can I cascade into? Some of these are not rules changes, but just to, so that people have an idea of how this works. Can I cast Fire, which is half of the split card Fire and Ice? Can I cast Granted, which is the adventure part of Fey Bushes, costing 3 and a blue? Can I cast the Tybalt Cosmic Impostor, which is the back face of Valky, God of Lies, costing 7? Or can I cast Ancestral Vision, which has no mana cost? Cool. I'm going to close this. So yeah, the answer is D, that you can cast Ancestral Vision. That has not changed. I don't think you've been able to cast Fire Ice for a while, back when they changed the split cards with Blade in a Jar, I think. You used to be able to cast Granted because you cascade into Fey Bushes and then you cast this, but you can't do that anymore. And of course, you can't cast the back half of this Tybalt and get a 7-mana Planeswalker for 3 mana. So that, I believe, is it.